Hi, everybody. Welcome to College Coach. We are recording a series of videos around the impact of COVID-19 on a variety of admissions and college finance topics. And I'm very excited to welcome the former director of admissions at Wharton Business School, Judith Hodari, who's also the co-founder of Fortuna Admissions. And Judith works regularly with students applying to MBA programs, or people applying to MBA programs. Hi, Judith.
Hi, good morning, Beth. Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely.
So happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm very happy to have you here. And I love technology because without it, I don't know what the heck we would all be doing with our time right now. But we have technology and we can create videos. So I think big question for me, and I think for some of those who might be watching this is this a good time to go to business school? Things are so uncertain just all over the board. What are you seeing and what do you think about that?
Sure. It's a question. Thank you so much for asking it, that we're getting a lot these days. And there's a couple of different ways to look at this. One is that a lot of students are home now and people are home now, people that have graduated from college, trying to figure out what they should be doing with their time. So this seems like, well, I've got a couple of months. Maybe I should consider applying to business school. And the other to think about is the economic impact of a recession. This is not the first one we've been in.
Yep.
Certainly 2008, 2001. I mean, they're fairly consistent.
Yes.
And if you kind of think about what is life going to be like for the next 2 years, and can I sort of wait it out in business school and then resume my career afterwards? So there's lots of conversations going on about, is this the right time? And how am I going to be able to afford it?
Right, exactly. So let's just talk about something fairly basic, which is if you do decide that you're going to apply, there are a few different rounds in which you apply, 3 to be exact.
Right.
In general, you encourage round 1, or what is the general philosophy around that?
What happens with MBA admissions is that most schools have decided, and this year is a little bit of an exception, but most schools, with the exception of Harvard, do have 3 rounds. The European schools, many of them will have 4 rounds. So they do 4 different intakes during the year. Typically, applications are due sort of the beginning of September or the beginning of January, or, kind of end of March, beginning of April, for those with 3 rounds. And on an average year, most people would apply between round 1 and round 2. There's lots of discussion. Am I better off with one or the other? Generally speaking, like anywhere, you should apply when you're ready, when you feel like you're going to be able to put forward a really, really strong application. What has happened this year, which is unprecedented, is there's a very robust round 3. All of the schools have pushed back their deadlines. So for those of you that are seniors in college, for those of you that are considering, hey, maybe this is a good time to go to business school, there are deadlines that are in June. So schools that typically would be locked up and finished with their decision-making process in a week or so are really extending these deadlines. And they're doing it for a number of reasons, many of which I'm guessing our audience can figure out.
Yes.
But we really don't know what the landscape is going to look like in the fall. Lots of requests coming in for deferrals, lots of concern about American embassies being able to give travel visas, lots of opportunities to stay at home and study through Zoom and not be on campus. So there's a lot of unanswered questions. What this has done is encourage schools to really open up their deadlines. And it's such a moving target. I really get everything every day. It's something every day.
Right.
And in our website, fortunaadmissions.com, we keep up with that. And so we say, oh, today, University of Chicago says this, and then tomorrow. Right. So I'm sure the same for undergrad institutions that are changing their deposit deadlines and really trying to be as supportive as they can be in a challenging time.
Right.
So this is a very long answer, Beth, and I apologize, but it's kind of, there's typically 3 rounds, sometimes 4. This year, round 3 is kind of off the charts. And we expect that we're going to see much increased volumes over the next month or so.
Right. And well, with all the uncertainty that you mentioned, obviously that means that probably some of these programs are concerned about filling their class. I mean, they're probably always going to fill the class, but what will the class makeup look like if you can't get a visa to come and study? are you going to have fewer international students? And therefore, do you need to admit more students from the US? And I don't think there are any answers to these questions, but all of the things leading to, like you say, this robust round three. So let's say you're sitting at home, you were not planning to apply to an MBA program this year, but now the deadline is not in early April, but instead is in June. What do you think about kind of making almost a decision? I don't want to say a snap decision, but just a decision in the moment to apply. Do you think that's a good choice?
We talk a lot with students about their timing. And just because there's a deadline in June doesn't mean it's your deadline. This is not a snap decision, Beth, as you said. And this is something that typically can take upwards of a year. So the first thing a student really would need to ask themselves is, am I applying just because I've got more time, or am I applying because I really want to do this?
Yeah.
And I'm applying because I was going to apply in the fall and I feel like I'm ready. So this is important to consider, and really taking a moment to figure out, is this the program that's the right fit for me? What is it that I want to do with this degree? How am I going to come out on the other side with these skills and this network and these opportunities? So really taking a moment to think about those pretty deep questions. The other thing I consider is look at what's being asked of you on the application essays. These are not always straightforward questions. They do require a lot of introspection, a lot of time to consider where you are, where you want to go, who you are. A little bit different in some ways in the undergraduate common application is that all the schools have different questions. There is no common application, although we've always talked about it, it's never come to fruition. So that's really, to me, the gut check question. And it may be that, yes, applying is a great idea, but maybe not by June, because the worst thing you can do is rush it and feel like you haven't given it your best effort, when if you gave yourself a little bit more time and planning, you would be in a much better position come September.
Right. So don't necessarily, now might be a great time to do a lot of work and preparation, but not for the June deadline, but maybe instead for the September deadline.
Of course, a great time to do your homework, to talk to current students, talk to recent graduates, talk to graduates 10 years out.
Right.
Really, spend the time, and it's a big investment of resources and time and energy. So you want to make sure that you're gathering information that's going to help you make a really good decision about the kind of culture you want to be a part of, the kind of opportunities you'd like to have. And again, I feel lately that there's a lot of pressure to be super, super productive in this time. Everyone's at home or in their apartment, or, not working full time necessarily, away from the home. And if you're in school, you're only in class, maybe 2 hours a day.
Right.
So you can be productive, but that doesn't necessarily mean that at the end of this time, you will have applied to business school. It may mean, again, Beth, that you're setting the scene to eventually apply.
Right, exactly. And one quick question I have is around testing. So is that even possible to take care of right now? I know on the undergraduate side, we are seeing test dates canceled left and right. There aren't a lot of opportunities to do tests on computers online yet. What's that look like for MBA programs?
There is a split going on. Some schools are really no longer requiring the GMAT or the GRE. Kellogg just announced this morning that they will accept applicants without it. The GRE is currently available online. The GMAT will be available online towards the end of the month. Now, just to be clear, it will require 4 hours of absolute silence, which for some people is not that easy to get, wherever they may be these days. And you need to be proctored. So you need to have a special kind of software installed on your computer, and you need to be able to show your camera during the time of the exam. Whether or not this shows an increase in exam scores, people are more comfortable, they're not so stressed out, it'll be super interesting to see. I'm actually fascinated by this kind of research that I think will come out of this period of time.
Yes.
Without those stressors of going into a testing center, what's going to happen?
Right.
So here's my overall perspective. If you want to take the exam online, to me, there's no harm, no foul in doing so, because if you're early enough in the process, you can then later take it in person. If you are curious about getting ready for the exam, now's a great time to study. There's lots of online resources that you can participate in. And perhaps you're ramping up to, again, take the exam, once the centers open again. But it's going to be super, super interesting to see when schools say, we don't require these exams, we would welcome your application anyway, how that's going to come into play with the rest of the applications that they're getting. So we're all watching this incredibly carefully.
Right, exactly. So for those listeners who are thinking along these lines, so, all right, I hadn't necessarily thought about business school, but now I am thinking about it, and maybe they're not going to apply in June. They're going to take your advice, which I'm hearing fairly loud and clear. To try and do this all in 2 months is probably not a good idea. But one big thing I would think that people could do is researching the right programs, especially because nobody can visit right now, which is not ideal. But what kinds of things are you suggesting that students do? And I would say to our listeners who are maybe even in high school, but who dream of one day going and getting their MBA, there is opportunity to kind of do some things online. So what are your suggestions on that front?
The first thing, of course, is to start with all the schools that you're thinking about and really just begin a basic run through of, well, what do they offer? How big is the program? What's the teaching like? Begin to get a sense of, I'm really interested, or I think I might be interested in advertising. Are there schools out there that would support me? And then begin to consider reaching out, as I mentioned, through current students, through recent grads, through recent graduates, and then on to people that graduated sort of 10 years later.
Yes. I
am finding that that current students and alums are really, really glad to take the time. Everybody's in the same position. There's a lot of sense of like, oh, I had a question and someone helped me out, so I'm going to help somebody else.
Yeah.
And I really appreciate that. Additionally, we are partnering on the 23rd and the 24th for a virtual MBA fair. It was supposed to be in London. And what's amazing is that all of these schools that may or may not have been available to be there in person are actually going to participate virtually. So it's Center Court with Poets and Quants, which is a fairly well-known industry website. And it's being run by Matt Simmons, who's my partner, and John Byrne from Poets and Quants. Terrific opportunity to hear a little bit more about the schools. So the funny thing is, it's actually a much more exclusive opportunity than you might have had otherwise if you weren't planning on traveling to London.
Right.
So anybody that I'm talking to, I'm going to be on that because there's a lot of stuff about some of those programs in London, and in the UK that I'm not as familiar with. So I think it's a great opportunity. A lot of American schools are going to participate as well. So it sounds like a funny thing, but now is a great time to really ask questions. Directors of admissions, while they're figuring out what to do with the fall, they're really available, interested in talking. And my colleagues and I all have the time to talk with you and be supportive during this funny time.
Yeah, for me, one of the things that I have been feeling on the undergrad side as well, there's certainly never there's never a replacement for actually setting foot on a campus and talking. I wouldn't say there isn't a replacement. We are talking face to face right now. But while there isn't a replacement for that, I do feel like what this has forced is a little bit of sometimes a deeper dive.
Yeah.
Well, you can't walk around campus and go eat a lunch on that cool new restaurant right down the street. So maybe instead you're going to look a little bit more closely at the academic program, which, let's be honest, is really the goal, right? So
it's true.
I don't want to say it's a silver lining. I don't know that I want to talk about this pandemic as having silver linings. I just think it is it's something that has developed that I think is not a bad thing. And I would encourage families to take advantage. And Judith, thank you so much for being here today. Again, Judith is a former director of admissions at the Wharton School of Business and currently runs the company she co-founded, Fortuna Admissions. Thanks so much, Judith.
Thank you, Beth. We'll see you soon.